welcome to Overtime Hockey Talk. My name is Mark Paul. My co-host Justin Baker is here and ready to rank the top 10 most overrated sons of bitches in the NHL. Justin, are you ready? I feel as though I have to be angry at these guys because they've just caused me so much. I don't know. Are they annoying because they're overrated? Is that like a? Are we angry at them, or are we angry at like the New York Post?
Angry at the New York
and
Post.
NBC Sports? No, not NBC Sports. ESPN.
There you go.
Who are we angry at for these guys being overrated?
Oh boy, everybody. Let's go with TSN because they're the
TSN.
big dogs.
Okay, it's TSN's fault. Yes. Well, if we're ranking TSN's most overrated players, then it's time to just put all Canadian players, like Canadian team players, on to this list. But what before we jump in, what made you decide on your list? Like what kind of factors were you thinking through?
Yeah, so I mean, I took a combination of things into play here, right? So one, the contract was huge, right? So if you're getting paid, like Austin Matthews money, right? You're expected to be, higher than a point per game player, put up 50 goals, 40 goals, whatever. There's certain expectations that come with certain contracts, right? So that played a large part into my consideration. The other part is, where you are expected to play in the lineup, right? So if you're getting top pairing minutes, you're expected to perform like a top pairing defenseman, right? For example, you might look at Mo Seider, right, from the Detroit Red Wings. He's a guy who gets top pairing minutes for Detroit. He plays, 25 minutes a night. So you expect his production to reflect that, right? And then so if you're
Are you saying he's on your list?
No, not at all.
He almost made mine.
And then,
I almost put him at number 10.
Wow, I would have just hung up the phone.
Hung up the phone. Like we're just not like you would have actually taken that handheld phone and crashed it into the receiver, and we would have all heard it.
Yeah, and then the other thing I also took into consideration too was your age, because if you're a young player, if you're a 20-year-old, for example, like Alex Lafreniere, right? He's somebody who really hasn't lived up to the hype of a number one overall pick. However,
funny enough, he's my other just missed.
He's my other. So yeah,
he really was on my just miss list.
I love it. But that's the thing too, right? So if if you're still young, I kind of give you a little bit more grace, a little bit of a pass sometimes, just because to me, right, you still have to kind of grow into that. However, if you're like, if you're Connor McDavid when he came out at 19, 20 years old, right, those expectations were there, and you could be judged a little bit more harshly, I feel like, when you're considered a franchise-altering player or generational talent. Okay.
All right. That's yep. I would agree. The one other thing that I had trouble with, I think, was including goalies on this list. Only one goalie made my list. It's almost like you got to have like a whole separate, maybe like a top 5 for goalies. But I had trouble doing the goalies with the skaters. A lot of mine came down to contracts. Some of it came down to hype, and I also had a hard time. You've got maybe some veterans who at one point were not overrated, but now they are, and you're like, well, I mean, how much is it that they're overrated, or just they're getting older, and so the 35-year-old isn't the same as the 28-year-old, and I don't know that anyone expects them to be. But I did have maybe a couple on my list that it was like, it seems like the expectation is still pretty darn high that they would perform like they were 26, and yet they aren't anymore. But it's not necessarily the player's fault that they're on this list. It's just maybe public perception, how they ended up on my list as well. Okay, well, why don't we start with your just miss list, since you went through all mine? Okay.
So I only have one person on my just missed, and that's Nicholas Suzuki.
Okay. Yep. Yeah, you could say he was on mine too, because I thought long and hard about him, decided not to put him there. But why is he just missing your list?
So I thought about putting him a little bit higher, but really given his age, right? So he got the pass a little bit, right? So I all the hype that came with him, a high pick coming out of Vegas, and really he's, already been given the captaincy for the Montreal Canadiens. And so there's certain expectations that come with that level of play. And really, when you're a number one center, right, there's also certain expectations that come with that. And, I feel like there's a lot of hype around this guy as, being the future and the present of Montreal. And really, it's just been kind of underwhelming for me just watching his play on the ice. And a lot of it has to do with the eye test. So
I feel like this last year, he took a pretty big step forward. I mean, I know his point totals were pretty similar from 61 to 66, not a huge jump. That plus minus, though, minus 29 to minus 13. I mean, that is a pretty stark improvement. But my one note was that he did most of that without Cole Caulfield, and the year before he was with Cole Caulfield. So, I mean, I think you're seeing an improvement on both ends of the ice. I almost put him in there because I have seen a lot of comparisons to Patrice Bergeron with him. That he doesn't put up the big points because he's more of a defensive center. That's fine. I'm okay with that. But to even try and breathe his name in the same breath is just disrespectful to Mr. Patrice Bergeron. So he missed my list, but he almost made it because, and maybe some of that's just like Montreal Canadiens hype train too, right? Like he had that monster playoffs his second year. When the Canadiens went to the finals too, and I think that probably has contributed to a little bit of the aura around him there. But being from Montreal, of course, you're always going to be a little more hyped than, say, a younger player from the San Jose Sharks.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing too, that I took into consideration, like when you mentioned line mates, right? So that played a factor in a lot of my decision making with this list. And when looking at Nick Suzuki, right, if he'd played the whole entire year with Cole Caulfield and had the same production, he probably would have made my top 10. However, without him, it kind of factored in a little bit too, where you say, okay, cool, well, now he's driving play a little bit more, whereas before you could say maybe it was Cole Caulfield driving the play.
Okay, that's fair. All right, let's swing on into the top 10. Who just made your list at number 10?
All right, the just makers. Number 10, I've got Matthew Barzal.
Okay, yeah, I have him on my list too, so that's we're right there, a little higher. But why is he on your list?
Yeah, so really, I mean, for one, right, he's getting paid $9.15 million bucks, so
sure.
There's that huge money expectation with it too, right? But when I look at his production, right, he's only been a point per game player once in his career, and that was his rookie season.
And that was with John Tavares as the number one center.
Absolutely, right? So now he's expected to
literally 6 years ago.
Right. Yeah, and so now he's the number one guy there. He is the guy there. The production just hasn't been there, and I get it, right? So
Barry Trotz.
Yeah, absolutely. The coaching, right? You want a little bit more defensive-minded play, but still, for a guy who skates like he does, who can drive play like he does, I expect a little bit more than just 60 points in 80 games. And granted, the point per games were a little bit higher this year than they have been the last few seasons, which is great to see that. But
yeah, if he hadn't gotten hurt, he's probably a 70-point guy. Right.
But also another reason why he makes my list now too.
Everyone's point totals went up about 10 points no matter what, so it doesn't really count.
Doesn't. But so another reason why, again, too, he gets a knock on my book is the fact that he's so poor in the face-off dot. He gives the puck away, a lot more than he takes it away. And this year he finally, granted, yes, it was only half the year, but he finally gets a line mate that is responsible defensively, and he still can't seem to increase the production where I feel it should be for being a number one, winger or center, whatever you want to call him.
Okay. I think all those are fair. My number 10 is a Pittsburgh Penguin goaltender, and it's Tristan Jarry. My only goaltender to make the list, but Tristan Jarry, I feel like he signs this huge contract, 5 years at $5.375 per, and he's 28 years old. I don't expect this contract to look great at the end of it. He really can't make it through a regular season, and this could have maybe been justified had Pittsburgh also gone out and got a goaltender that you look at him and go, okay, I'm comfortable with that goaltender also playing alongside of him. But do we feel that way about Alex Nedeljkovic? I personally do not. I I shudder to think about the possibility of Nedeljkovic getting into like 35 games for the Pittsburgh Penguins. That to me is pretty much you will not make the playoffs if he plays that much. So it worries me about Jari. He's never proven that he can play too many games. He always gets hurt. And I think that he's been horribly overrated, at least by one man, and that would be Kyle Dubas. I know you could say he didn't have any other options, but you're going to spend that kind of money. I feel like you do have options. You could have gone out and made a trade, done something different, and instead he's banking on him being healthy for once. I guess Carolina's made that bet on Freddie Anderson, and it sort of worked, except for, oh wait, he got hurt again. Like all these goalies that we see people make bets on, they'll have a healthier year. No, they don't. They just don't. And like I said, if you could guarantee me Jari's only going to play 40 games in the regular season, like a Ben Bishop kind of vibe, I could be there. But he will get pushed and will likely get hurt. So, or he'll be playing through an injury, and that'll be the excuse. So, that's Tristan Jarry. He's the first of 2 Penguins on my list.
Of 2 Penguins?
Yes.
Okay.
Can I just jump into my number 9? Because it's another Penguin.
Go for it. Let's go.
It's Erik Karlsson, the Norris Trophy winner.
Yeah. I can't wait to hear this, because when you win some hardware, right, there's a good reason you're winning hardware. Sure.
Yeah. There's a great reason he won it. It's because the Norris Trophy is the Art Ross Trophy for defensemen. So, he had a fantastic year. There's no doubt about it. Tell me at any point in the regular season, did he have anything to play for in terms of winning games? None.
Well, I'll
absolutely
give you that one.
None.
Nothing.
So, he had. Now, I'm not saying that anyone could have just obviously, you've got plenty of good defensemen on bad teams or good players on bad teams, and they don't put up record-setting seasons, right? So it's not as if Erik Karlsson's bad. I'm not saying he's bad. I'm not saying he's not a Hall of Famer. I'm not even saying he's not the best defenseman of his generation. But I think at this stage of the game, at 33 years old, going on to the Pittsburgh Penguins, who are old as frickin' dirt, I think him going there, and all of a sudden, this Pittsburgh team that couldn't even beat shit Chicago to make the playoffs, I don't think that Erik Karlsson walks in here and makes the difference that we think he will. And I'm not going to give any predictions yet, but I've got some really fun predictions about the Pittsburgh Penguins when the time comes. But Erik Karlsson is overrated from the standpoint that he's going to walk into the Pittsburgh Penguins and change the entire organization from a non-playoff team into a Stanley Cup contender. That's absurd.
Okay.
There it is. There it is. The old HT.
I cannot wait to hear these off-season predictions with these teams.
Oh my! Oh. I'm ready. I'm about ready. We could start any time. Yeah. We just I want to see a couple more signings. No, there's no signings left that'll really make a big difference. But
too great. I mean, listen, Thomas Tatar could come in and make the difference there in Pittsburgh.
Tommy Tatar. Yep, for sure. Okay, well, let's hear your number 9.
All right, number 9. I've got somebody from your favorite team and my only Maple Leaf to make this list. That is John Tavares.
Okay. Yep. So far, two Islanders at some point have made your list.
Yep. And I got another former Toronto Maple Leaf later on my list too. So do
I. I know exactly who you picked.
I don't think you.
And
do.
I'm not looking at it. I'm not looking at his list, there, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just guessing because I maybe have him on my list too. Why is John Tavares on your list? He's also on mine, but how did he end up on yours?
Okay, so I mean, first off, I went and took a peek at regular season stats here, and for a team that's very high scoring, a guy who basically put up a point per game this season, his goals above expected were the worst on the Toronto Maple Leafs, right? And then I went and took a peek at salaries, and he has the 8th highest AAV in the NHL. And at that kind of level, when you're making top 10 money in the NHL, to me, there's certain expectations. And yes, I understand that John Tavares is a very good faceoff man. He plays a very good two-way game, right? But for a guy who has to drive play and produce offensively a little bit more, especially come playoff time, it just was a little disappointing for me. And to be quite honest, he's one of those players where every time I see him play, right, I like him, but I always want more, right? There's always something lacking there. And I think ever since he came into the NHL, he wasn't necessarily looked at like a Sidney Crosby generational type player, but he was looked at as like, a guy you build a team around. And to me, he hasn't been that for a while, right? I mean, ever since he came to Toronto, I mean, yes, his first season was great. I thought he did, he played pretty well there, but right now, I mean, you've got 18 even strength goals, and primarily most of his points are coming on the power play right now. I mean, that's tough for me to swallow when I need a little bit more 5-on-5 play from this guy, and hopefully for the Toronto Maple Leafs in general. Yeah,
at $11 million, it's he's higher on my list, and that's the reason why. I mean, it's not that he's a bad player; it's that
not at all.
And it's not even that he hasn't like come close to expectations. He's been good. He's had, he basically over the course of 5 seasons with the Leafs, he's at a point per game. I think he's 4 points under a point per game over the course of almost 300 games or whatever it is. So I'll give him that. He's had a nice little run in Toronto. He's played fine. He's been pretty decent in the playoffs too. Hasn't been magnificent, but he's had some moments. He also had, of course, that catastrophic hit by Corey Perry in Game 1 against the Montreal Canadiens in the bubble.
Mm-hmm.
It does make me wonder what would have happened had the Leafs had a healthy Tavares all through those that series. I think that's probably enough to put the Leafs over the top over the Canadiens, and then who knows what happens from there. All hindsight, of course, but I would agree. I think that he's been largely his expectations were so astronomical because of the deal you signed. I think now you said he's the 8th highest player at the time. Was he not the second or third highest player in the league?
Yeah, at the time, absolutely.
So had Connor McDavid signed his deal yet? I think he had, right?
Yes. Yep.
So I think that would have been the first year of McDavid's deal, if I'm not mistaken. But it's pretty darn close to the highest paid player in the league, and you're he's right there. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that is the same year as McDavid signed that 12.5. So McDavid's making 12.5 and you're getting 11. I mean, you want to see something. I get he's a UFA. I get all that stuff, but largely has not met that superstar expectation. He's been good. He's been good enough to where he's not a bust or anything, but I think people were hoping that he would reach another level, and he never got better than he was with the Islanders. Maybe that's what's most disappointing.
Absolutely. That sums it up pretty good, actually.
And one playoff series win in 5 years with him. That hurts too. All right. Who do you have at number 8?
At number 8, I've got Pierre-Luc Dubois.
Okay. That's an interesting pick. Recently traded to the Los Angeles Kings. Kind of on a downswing. What made you drop him in here? What makes you think that he's overrated? Yeah,
I don't know what it is, but maybe it's just his attitude, his air that I'm a superstar, that I'm this world beater player where I can pretty much pick and choose where I want to go kind of attitude, right? That he sets these expectations where okay, cool. Now you're making it sound like you're a superstar and you can just do whatever you want, right? Like a LeBron James, where you can basically show up and be like, this year I'm going to go to Miami. Next year Cleveland. Yep. Next year LA.
Yep.
So again, I get this certain, I don't know if you want to call it vision of what I expect him to be, but all these teams keep pandering for him. Everybody wants him. This offseason when you knew he was moving, everybody was looking to grab him. He just honestly has been nothing more than a second-line center to me, and everybody treats him like he's a first-line center superstar guy. And I get it. He was decent in Winnipeg this past season, and yes, he's only 24 years old, so maybe that attitude might change a little bit. Now that he signed that long-term deal, but really for a guy who coming out of the draft, he was taken third overall, so there were some expectations.
I don't know if you remember that draft. I feel like he was taken earlier than expected.
Yes, absolutely. A lot of people were surprised that Columbus didn't take Jesse Puljujarvi or and then you have guys
which in hindsight they did make the right pick.
Right. Well, yes, absolutely in hindsight, right? But you think about it, you could have had Matthew Tkachuk instead.
That's not a bad. Yeah, that's a good point.
yeah. Again, it's hindsight, right? But this is a guy who now coming in is basically sold himself as the number one guy, and he's never been that.
Actually, he was the top ranked North American skater because Austin Matthews was considered a European skater.
That's right.
Because he played in Switzerland. Tkachuk was number 2, and you had Chychrun, McAvoy, Keller on that list too. So some decent high end guys on there, but then it kind of fell apart after that. But I mean, it's not as if he was a bad pick.
No,
he's not a bust or anything.
No, not at all. And he's still a good player. And I would love to have him in Detroit if that was the case. But again, for $8.5 million right now, the expectations have gone up a little bit more. And to me, right now, he feels overrated.
Okay. He needs to be better in the counting stats, I think, is kind of what you're hinting at.
Yeah, and last year he gets to play with a 40 goal scorer and Kyle Connor, and basically you don't even manage to put up a point per game. I mean, gosh, come on, man.
I guess there is the the fact of where he came from, new coach there in Winnipeg last season, and the way that Rick Bowness coaches a little more tight defensively. That could play into it. It'll be interesting to see what happens here. I mean, is it fair to say that he has a shot at getting off your list if he has a really great season this year?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you look at the players he gets to play with, right? So you have to imagine they're still going to try to roll in with Anze Kopitar as their number 1, and eventually maybe make the move to Pierre. Maybe in year 2 or 3. But again, he'll have sheltered minutes, but he'll also have some really good talent to play alongside, and Adrian Kempe, Kevin Fiala. There'll be guys that'll help him produce. So there's really no more excuses left now, right? You've got the big deal. You're in a major city. You're with a championship caliber team. So really the sky's the limit, and the expectations are even higher now coming in next year. So if you fail, you're going up on my list.
Okay. All right. Well, my number 8 is another former Toronto Maple Leaf, and that is Nazem Kadri from the Calgary Flames. The deal that he signed was, good on him. He had a career year when there was a whole bunch of injuries in the regular season. He got to play with Makar and got to play with a lot of really good players, feeding him the puck on the power play. He had his magical year in his contract year, and it's no knock on Kadri because basically everyone does it, but I look at him, I go, it was a contract year. It was the year he went totally balls out and he cashed in. And for whatever, human nature, whatever it may be, he had his best season. I don't think he's coming anywhere close to what he put up his final year in Colorado. I think he's a good player, but I think he was hyped big time. He was the only guy available. Calgary's desperate to get people that want to come there, and that's Nazem Kadri. I don't think he's a number 1 center. I think he is best suited on a great team as a number 3, like in a top 9 where he can kind of dance all over the place and play. He could play up in the lineup when you need him to, but I think ideally you've got at least 1 really good center ahead of him, if not 2. Which was the case in Toronto.
2.
Like when he was great, it was when he was the 3rd line center for the Leafs. No, I think he's overrated.
Okay, that's fair. I certainly can't blame you.
I don't think he's a bum or anything. I just think he's overrated.
No. And another thing I like to, I typically do too is some guys that maybe are in a new system, they get a little bit more of a pass, right, or just maybe a discount on their play a little bit, right? So, like maybe you could put Jonathan Huberdeau right on this list too, but maybe I give him a pass for what it was first year, new system, new coach. We'll see how he does again next year, but
yep, fair. All right, who do you have at number 7?
All right, number 7. I've got my first of 3 goaltenders on my list. So
3 goals, all right.
Yeah, so almost half my list now. But Thatcher Demko, to me, makes my list at number 7.
Interesting. What made you put him there?
So, to be quite honest, I look at this guy, and so to me, honestly, just looking at him, I mean, like I mentioned, he just doesn't pass the eye test to me. You could contribute it to this team just had a poor year defensively, but overall, just looking at him, he just doesn't look sound in the net. And again, when he came into the NHL, obviously they move on from guys like Corey Snyder, Roberto Luongo, Jacob Markstrom, right? And they make room for Thatcher Demko, right? He's the next Herald starter. Essentially 2021, he plays 35 games, a .915 save percentage, which isn't bad for a guy basically playing backup minutes, but gets thrusted not last year, but 2 seasons ago, 21, 22, into a starter role.
Yeah, after Markstrom left.
Yeah, after Markstrom left, and he was fine. It wasn't anything to write home about. It wasn't superb, or like you're looking at this guy and like Jeremy Swayman, right? After his first season, 30-ish games and a .920 save percentage, I'm like, okay, I see where you're going here. And kind of had those same feelings about Demko, but last 2 seasons ago, when he's the full-time starter, it was a little weary. And of course, he got the big contract, to be basically paid like a starter and take over. And again, this season, injuries, he just doesn't really look like he's comfortable in the net. And maybe again, part of that might have to do with the fact that he's again, dealing with a below par defense, but the way his forward group drives play in front of him, that should be good enough for him to, at least, keep some of these pucks out of the net. It was just, there were a lot of times where, this season, it was just hard to watch him and hard to watch, Vancouver as a whole. And
yeah, minus 3 goals saved above expected. So yeah, definitely had a shaky year.
Yeah. And
whereas
all of his
15
numbers,
the year before.
Yeah. All of his numbers they just weren't there this year. And, again, I'm not really sold on him yet as a number 1. He might be a very, very good 1B, but right now, the way people, especially because he's from a Canadian market, he gets hyped up a little bit more, and that might be
people watch him a little more. Yeah, for sure. By the way, he was 7th in Vezina Trophy voting in 21-22, but you would say that that's because he's overrated, not because he was necessarily that great.
Absolutely.
All right. Didn't make my list, but that's a good one, especially given what happened this last year. You go, all right, like who really are you? What goalie are we going to see? He did play 64 games the year before. That's a lot of games. Hopefully the Vancouver Canucks can manage that better and he doesn't end up getting hurt. And, I think there's a chance he plays for Vancouver all year. I think he also might be one of those names that we hear a lot on the trade block. I know he still has 3 years left on his deal, but for a team looking for a goalie at $5 million, I got to think that Demko, if he can get going at all, I got to think that they would consider moving him, especially given where they've been at. All right, well, I digress. I'll go to my number 7. My number 7 is a Dallas Stars former star, I would say. Well, he's a current Dallas star. He used to be a star. I think he's still talked about like he is this star player who just needs to return to form a little bit and that he can totally get there. But in my mind, he is nothing. He's a shell of who he was, and that's Tyler Seguin.
Oh, I like it.
Tyler Seguin just has, I know, everybody talked about it. Like this year, he had a return to glory year. And you know what? He basically had the same year as he did the year before. He just wasn't horrible defensively. But I kind of contribute that to the rest of the team, not to him. I think that this team would be better off without him. Not because he's a bad player, but because his cap hit is ridiculous, basically $10 million a year. And it's going to be that way for another 4 seasons, including this one, and he is nothing more than a 50-point player.
Yeah, that's tough, right?
And it's probably getting worse.
Right, probably, right? And that's tough when you talk about a cap hit, right? I mean, at least with John Tavares, you're getting a guy who's still going to give you some offensive production.
Yeah, he's still putting up close to 80 points a season. It's fine.
Yeah, and if Tyler Seguin was close to this, maybe 70 points, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now.
Right. And yeah, I know he was there for the playoff. He managed to kind of stay healthy and all this, and like he was healthy the year before. It was really just that 2020-21 season where he only played 3 games. But I feel like Tyler Seguin, I mean, hey, prove me wrong. I hope that he has a nice return to glory and that he can find himself again. I mean, he was great for Dallas. His first several seasons in Dallas, he was great. 84, 77, 73, 72, 78, 80 points. It's really just been since 1920 that he kind of fell off the map. Ironically, that was the year they went to the Stanley Cup Finals, and he was absolute garbage with 2 goals there in 26 games. And that to me is kind of his like beginning of his true decline. He just couldn't hang in those tough moments, I think for the most part he's just a very overpaid second line center. And that brings us to number 6. Who do you have?
Number 6, I've got another goaltender, and that is Jack Campbell.
Oh, good Lord. It's not even fair. He was just trying to get some money, Justin.
Again, I don't blame anybody.
He played his hand so well.
He did. He really did, right? So I can't ever blame a guy for wanting to get paid, right? There's that part of it. But, again, if you want to go get paid and if you want people to pay you like a starter, you got to kind of perform like a starter, right? I mean, look, a guy on the only goaltender on your list, Tristan Jarry, at least he put up some decent numbers to where you're like, okay, this is kind of doable, right? Assuming he stays healthy, right? That's a whole other.
Campbell basically put up a good October through December one time.
Right.
And he got paid out the ass.
Yeah. And what's funny is so I often wonder, and probably the main reason why he's this high and on my list to begin with, is I looked at that Toronto team last year or 2 seasons ago and compared them to this 2022-23 team where Toronto's defense just got much, much better. They improved so much defensively as a team and as, a back end. And I wonder, okay, so Jack Campbell was able to put up some decent numbers in Toronto with a subpar defensive team. Imagine what he could. I think he probably would have done pretty good on a Toronto team had he put up, again.
I think he just went to the wrong system, and maybe they'll build more around him. I don't know, but I agree. I mean, it just seems like it's a disaster. But we've also seen where, hey, a goalie has a rough year and they turn right around and they're a solid goalie again. I think goaltending is it's so tough to be great or even good every year. So many goalies aren't good every year, but it's just a matter of can he get out of his head and get back into it and find his game again. And
well, that's the thing.
We'll see.
You look at the goals saved above expected, right? He's 4th worst in the NHL, and guys behind him on the list are Elvis Merzlikins. We know how terrible Columbus was.
And that's not even his fault, yeah.
Right, San Jose, and then Spencer Martin from Vancouver, who shouldn't even be.
All those teams were totally non-playoff teams. Whereas you've got Edmonton, it's not just a playoff team, but a Stanley Cup contender.
Right, and
you can't find yourself there. Yeah,
yeah, they control the play, they control the puck. So you think there would be, just some better numbers there to go by, but there's nothing there.
All right, my number 6 is a Nashville Predator that I think was not horribly overpaid, but overpaid, and for a very long time. That is Philip Forsberg. He had a really fantastic season in 21-22, and like Nazem Kadri, he had a career year and went and signed a big fat deal, and last year didn't look as good. I know he got hurt. He only played 50 games. But even before that year, when Forsberg had 84 points, 42-42 in 69 games, and before that, he never once put up a point per game. He didn't score more than 33 goals, and that was in 15-16. He hadn't scored more than I mean, yeah, he hadn't scored more than 30 since 16-17. So I think horribly overrated. They just were desperate to keep someone that wanted to stay there, and they paid him a lot of money. I don't think he's a bad player, but I think that he is a second line winger. So he's overpaid at $8.5 million. Especially he's August 13th. He just turned 29, so it's not going to be too long before he's 30, and he just seems like the kind of player that might not age super well because he already hasn't. So that's my number 6.
Okay.
All right, let's head into your top 5. I'll give you 2 of my top 5s because we've already hit them. At 5, I have Matthew Barzal, and at 4, I have John Tavares. So
wow. Okay.
Yeah, I've got a few of those fellers pretty high. I've got them that high because of a lot of the reasons we talked about. Tavares just so tremendously overpaid for what he actually brought to the table. So that's that there. Kind of same for Barzal, but Barzal more or less really great rookie season, and everyone's been talking about him since then. And he's been a pretty average 1B type of center since then. He's a Ryan Johansson. He's just this generation's, like this kind of iteration of Ryan Johansson. A nice center who should be a second line center, but is getting paid like a first line center because he's flashy. People like him. He's getting more money because of it. All right, let's go your 5-4.
All right, number 5, I've got Seth Jones from the Chicago Blackhawks.
He's my number 3.
Dude, there you go. All right.
We're right there.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I mean, obviously he played on a terrible team last year, but listen, with that contract and the expectations coming out of Columbus and Nashville, whatever you want to, wherever you want to go back to. I mean, listen, he was expected to be a top 2 defenseman in this game, and initially
he was for a little while, yeah.
Yeah, he had flashes of there, looked pretty good, but
played really well when he was with Werenski.
Yeah, but those last couple of years in Columbus started seeing things go downhill, and ultimately here in Chicago when he was traded and signed that massive extension, it has not looked good. And I mean, I get it. They're right there. They're on the rebuild, so expectations have to be tempered a little bit. But again, you lead your team and giveaways. All your numbers just are looking very subpar.
No, he's not. He's not even a top pairing defenseman.
No,
I mean, he's getting paid like he's one of the best defensemen in the league, and he's not even a top pairing defenseman.
Yeah, and I would gladly pay him to be my number, my second pairing guy.
Sure, $5-6 million a year, and he's probably off this list.
Yep, couldn't agree more.
Yep. That and there was so much hype around him getting dealt. And there was so much evidence that he was already overrated and already on the wrong side of his trajectory because every time Werenski went down, he went in the toilet. And everyone saw how many deficiencies he had when he didn't have a really talented actual top pairing defenseman playing with him. And frankly, it was obvious to many people, except for, I guess, at the time, was that Stan Bowman? Yeah, it was.
Yep.
So, good luck, Stan, getting another job. That last name will help, right? Well, he has some Stanley Cups, too,
Yeah, that'll help a little bit.
He helped somebody dingle a kid, but he'll probably still get a job. I mean, I'm not wrong.
You're not.
He played a small part. No matter how small part it was pretty... Anyways. Who do you have at number 4?
All right, at number 4, I've got Marc-Andre Fleury.
I saw him on some lists. I did a little research, seeing what other people thought. I saw him on some lists. Why do you have him on so high at this stage in his career? Are we talking like his whole career? Just now?
Not at all.
Right now?
Just recently. Yeah, the last few seasons. I mean, look, he looked phenomenal in Vegas. His last season there, and you know what? I felt bad for the guy because I still thought he had something left to give. And, I don't know what really happened there. And I'm sure, 10 years from now, we'll hear some stories from some guys behind the scene that'll talk about it after Fleury retired. Like it was his agent, or maybe it was really Marc-Andre Fleury that put out that tweet. Whatever. I don't care.
Oh, that whole thing.
Yeah, so he gets traded to Chicago, which, again,
They still boinked him over, though.
Yeah, they did absolutely, and that was Vegas's thing, right? They basically are willing to trade anybody at any time, and we see that this offseason when they trade Riley Smith, right?
Let's be. They made the worst bet because they bet on Robin Leonard that year.
Well, luckily for them,
but it worked out. I mean, it did work out.
It worked out.
Yeah.
Yes, but you know what? Marc-Andre Fleury goes to Minnesota, a team that is historically more defensive than offensively, right? So I figured, you know what? Okay, he's coming from Chicago, a team that had no defense in front of him, and he put up okay numbers there. So he's going to go to Minnesota, and you know what? His first season there, he comes in during the regular season 9-2, and then he gets the playoff run. And I'm thinking, you know what? Shit, he kind of screwed over Cam Talbot there because Cam Talbot was there all year. He looked really, really good.
Yep.
He even looked very good going in down the stretch as Marc-Andre Fleury, but they decided to go with the veteran netminder, which, okay, you could flip a coin on that one, and you could understand maybe why they wanted to go with Fleury. But he looked atrocious in the playoffs. They give him this contract. Now he's stuck there, a no movement clause. Last year just looked terrible, looked very much out of place, his age showing. And so really for a guy who, coming into Minnesota was expected to be a starter, he's supposed to carry that team now. It looks like his days are behind him.
Yep. And I guess my thought is that he's not overrated because everyone feels that way, that well, he's old and he's he's hit his end of the road. And so from my perspective, personally, at least, I don't overrate him because I don't have any expectations of him. Anything that he can give now is like that last little bit when you're trying to squeeze a little more water out of a sponge and you find a little pocket and you get some extras. That's what hey, maybe you find that pocket and he gives you some spectacular moments. But
here's the thing though, from a Minnesota Wild perspective, they trade away Cam Talbot, a guy who was good, who was playing well. You're right. To basically make him their starter and their number one, and it just hasn't worked out.
Yeah, they had too high of expectations. That's fair. That's a good. Yeah, did the team have too high expectations of that player? Absolutely. That's a good point. All right. Well, you're number 3 because mine was Seth Jones.
Yeah, number 3 for me is my second Edmonton Oiler, and not last Edmonton Oiler on the list. Darnell Nurse.
He's my number 2. I need to look at your list beforehand so I can just go in and make edits to mine so that I feel better.
Hands down, this is all I'm going to say, hands down the most overpaid defenseman in the league right now. Maybe overpaid player.
Maybe most overpaid player, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, I'm trying to think of a player that I would rather have less with how much money he makes. So, yeah,
I mean, listen,
I'm right there.
He has a golden opportunity to cash in, playing on, the first power play unit with guys like, Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, and just can't seem to produce, really. I mean, you look at, other players like Charlie McAvoy, Quentin Hughes, Cale Makar, these guys who, are, top defense young guys, like Darnell Nurse was kind of heralded to be, and they kind of lived up to the hype, but he has not. And, he loses that number 1 power play to Tyson Barrie, and now it's, Evan Bouchard. So,
yep.
It's
it's almost like you don't even have to really talk much about it because it's just so obvious. It's one of the more obvious ones that he's been bad since he signed that contract. He was kind of bad before he signed that contract, and that's that.
And 4 more years of no movement clauses either.
Beautiful.
Before you get to a modified.
Just beautiful. Well, I guess who's your number 2?
Oh boy. Yeah, number 2, probably not on your list, but I've got Brad Marchand.
Okay, Brad Marchand. Interesting. Why is he overrated?
Yeah, so obviously, I've every single year you see the NHL.com, TSA, and all these publications. They always put out their top 20 wings, top 10 players in the NHL,
sure.
And you always see Brad Marchand's name make those lists. At least when it comes to left or wingers in general, right?
Probably because he's by a more than a point per game player, making $6 million.
Right, which is great. I mean, I think he's a great value player, right, for the money you're paying him and what you're getting in return.
So doesn't that say that he's not overrated because he's a great value player?
Well, here is
would he be on your top value players list?
No, not at all.
Because look at the value he get. I mean, yeah, 67 points in 73 games, not quite a point per game. But before that, 80 and 70, 69 and 53, 87 and 70.
Well, here's why he is, to me, overrated. And, for one thing, I just don't like his game to begin with. He's a dirty player. And you know what? You can say what you want about that, but I went all the way back to 16-17 when David Pastrnak came in the league. And, well, not when he came in the league, but when he emerged in the league as a top-line winger. And that's when you saw Patrice Bergeron and Brad Marchand's numbers just go through the roof, right? Because Pasta shows up and he starts producing. So, again, I looked at it every single year and you see, okay, if Pasta's producing, so is Marchand, right? So where is Marchand without him? Well, this year was a clear example. Pasta gets moved to the second line. He plays alongside, Eric Haula and Taylor Hall or Tyler Bertuzzi, whomever is in there.
Still score 60 goals.
Yeah, and still scores 60 goals, right? So clearly he doesn't need any of these guys to do what he does, and there's a reason why he's getting paid $11+ million. However, Brad Marchand's numbers, what do? They slip.
Yeah, that's
his
true.
Possession numbers slip. His giveaways just go up. He's always
also 35 years old. Like I just don't know if he's overrated as much as he's just kind of aging.
Well, I'll tell you this. I mean, we're going to see, I think, the true form of.
Well, he's going to be back with Pastrnak, I would think.
Well, we don't know. I mean, they still got DeBrusk in there. They've still got Eric Haula, who played pretty well with Pasta there before David Ritchie came back. So it'll be interesting to see, right? So Brad Marchand to me is not a line driver, and he's not. He's a little bit of a goon when he's not playing with Pasta. So. We'll see if he was, if he's really truly overrated.
All right, that's a gutsy move. I like it. All right, I'm gonna take my number one first because you've just beat me to practically all mine. So I'm gonna go with my number one, and it is an Anaheim Duck. Was on the cover of NHL 22, I think, or 23. Was Trevor Zegras.
Really?
Most overrated son bitch in the NHL. This guy is nothing more than a second line player. And he is not he hasn't gotten paid yet. I think there's a reason he hasn't gotten paid because they're looking at him going, you're like a 20 goal scorer in the NHL. We're not going to pay you the $9 million that you're hoping for. I think that he is overrated. It's not that he's bad. It's not that I wouldn't want him on my team. He is the way that people talk about him is like he's one of the top 5 most skilled players in the NHL. He is not. He's done a couple cool things with the puck. Is he creative? Absolutely. Would I put him on maybe top 10 most creative players in the league? Sure. Does that mean that you're not overrated? Because frankly, you haven't done anything in the league and people talk about you like you're God. I'm gonna wait and see. So for now, he is my most overrated player in the National Hockey League.
Okay. I'll give him another year or two before I start going there because, again, he's young, he's flashy, right? So there comes a little bit of, you're overrated, overhyped because of that flash. But, I don't know. I think because he's on the West Coast, he doesn't get as much hype as maybe some guys on the East Coast would.
He was on the cover of NHL. Like I was on the cover of the most it's basically it's like being on the cover of Madden. You are so hyped, and who's on the cover of Madden? Or on the cover of NHL. You've got Austin Matthews, and it's usually Connor McDavid. It's big name players, and Zegras got thrown into that mix, and he is not that. Player.
Because he scored a Michigan goal, and that's really the only reason
he scored a cool goal.
Cover.
Exactly. So he's so overrated because he scored a cool goal. So dumb.
Well, so did Kent Johnson. So by that logic, Kent Johnson needs to get on there.
But he didn't do it first, so.
That's true.
All right. Who's your number one? I'm curious.
Number one for me is Evander Kane.
Oh, interesting. All right. I want to hear why.
Yeah. So here's the thing. He's always been touted as, and I don't want to say elite goal scorer, but he's been touted as, a really good goal scorer for so long. And, again, take all that personal off-ice stuff that, aside, right? All his bankruptcy issues, all that stuff. But, teams have always coveted him because he can score goals. But really, he's only scored more than 30 once.
He scored 30 once, yeah.
Yeah, scored 30 once. That was it. And he's always played ever since 2012-13 in Winnipeg. He has played at least 18 plus minutes a night, which is top line minutes. And if you're giving a guy those kind of minutes, whether it's in Buffalo, San Jose, when the teams were, not really that good, or even now in Edmonton when, the teams are, supposed to be Stanley Cup contenders, he's not producing. And I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't expect him to put up, 85, 90 points, but hell, I mean, for a guy who plays alongside Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid every freaking shift, that should be a gimme of, getting 70
it actually
points.
Surprises me, and I think it will surprise some of our listeners that his best season is 56 points in a year.
Right.
That he played, actually, that year is the most games he's played in his career at 75 games. So, he's never played more than 75 games in a year. Most years he plays somewhere between 55 and 60 games, and he's only put up 56 points in the most. That's the only year he has more than 50 points. So, man, what a pick! That's actually I'll give it to you. That's a great find, because he is a horribly overrated player.
Yeah, and he got paid. I mean, $7 million a season to. I mean, what the frick, San Jose? He has a 56-point season, and you're going to shell out that money. And he's usually
leading 5.
Yeah, and he's usually top of your team as far as penalty minutes are concerned too. So
not the most disciplined young lass,
right?
Yeah. All right. Well, I love it. That's a great list. Good job on it, and
good job to you.
Looking forward. I think we may have to start jumping into some like actual team things going on. And we'll figure that out for the next show. Until then, you can find us on Twitter at OT Hockey Talk. We hope that you're enjoying your summer. Hockey is almost back. I think we have like 3.5 weeks or so before training camp. So we're getting close. And Justin, hope you have a great rest of your day. To our listeners, enjoy the sunshine, and we'll talk to you guys soon.